What would you do if the person you loved casually told you they wanted an open marriage, then revealed they were already seeing someone else? For me, it turned a dream anniversary into the beginning of the end. My wife casually brought up an unexpected question one evening, asking, "What are your thoughts on an open marriage?" Without missing a beat, I replied with a grin, "Absolutely, I'm all for it. You know, trust, communication, spending quality time together. That's way better than being stuck in a closed marriage where we live like roommates, avoiding each other in separate rooms." I thought I was being clever, but something about her question stayed with me. I'm Brian, 49 years old. I've been married to Megan for 18 years, and together, we have a 17-year-old daughter named Louise. Megan and I run a small business, a modern take on the classic mom-and-pop store. Between handling finances, back-to-back meetings with clients, and shuffling Louise between her countless extracurriculars, it's a rare moment when we can sit and just catch our breath. We've always been busy people. Megan thrives on her yoga classes, book clubs, and what she calls the art of brunching. I stay preoccupied with my woodworking projects, managing the business, and weekly basketball games with the guys. We're both social, constantly on the move. Over time, the distance between us grew, not in an obvious, catastrophic way but more like a slow drift. I figured that's just how life unfolds, and honestly, I thought the space was good for us. It added some mystery, kept things interesting. For our 17th anniversary, I decided to go all out. Megan had been subtly dropping hints that she was in desperate need of a break, so I booked a weekend at Monarch Bay Resort in Dana Point, California. Think stunning oceanfront views, sunsets so surreal they look like something out of a dream, and an atmosphere that practically shouts, "You deserve this." It's the kind of place where even the Eggs Benedict gets treated like a work of art on Instagram. When I told Megan about the trip, her entire face lit up. Her green eyes sparkled as she exclaimed with a wide smile, "Oh, Brian. You actually listened to me for once." And that, my friends, is marriage in a nutshell, getting a standing ovation for simply paying attention. The resort turned out to be everything I'd imagined and more. We spent our days lounging by the infinity pool, sipping margaritas as the rhythmic crash of waves echoed in the background. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no work, no Louise-related teenage dramas, and no barrage of phone notifications. It was just us, no distractions. We were happy. It felt normal again. Like we were the couple we used to be before life had turned into a constant whirlwind. On our second night, I made reservations for dinner at an intimate seaside restaurant on the resort's property. Megan wore a flowy summer dress and looked breathtaking. As I watched her, I thought to myself, we've still got it. We clinked our glasses together, laughed about old memories, and even shared a few half-serious jokes about aging. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But little did I know, this weekend of reconnection wasn't going to end the way I'd hoped. Something was on Megan's mind, something that would soon change everything. I have to admit, at that moment, I was feeling like a husband of the year. The weekend had been going perfectly, until it happened. As the waiter cleared our plates, Megan leaned back in her chair with a content, almost dreamy expression. "You know, Brian," she began, her voice soft, "I love this place. I can't wait to come back here again, with Jack. He'd absolutely adore the relaxing atmosphere." For a second, her words didn't register. My mind stumbled over the name like someone tripping on an unseen step. Jack. Jack. Did she just say Jack? Who the hell is Jack? I must have looked completely stunned because Megan simply sipped her wine as though she'd just made a casual comment about the weather. My heart was pounding, and it took a few moments for me to regain my composure. Finally, I managed to stammer, "Megan, who's Jack?" She blinked at me, wide-eyed, as if I was the one acting irrationally. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't some innocent slip of the tongue. Megan knew exactly what she was doing. Just like that, the dreamy glow of our anniversary weekend evaporated, crashing down in front of me like shattered glass. I sat there, stunned, trying to process her words. But before I could collect my thoughts, she leaned in and said, "Wait, you don't know Jack. He's my friend from yoga. Oh, and I even got him to join my book club." She said it so nonchalantly, like she was introducing me to a neighbor I'd just never crossed paths with, not someone she'd apparently been spending significant time with behind my back. But Megan wasn't done. "Oh no," she launched into a full-on enthusiastic description of this Jack guy, her eyes sparkling as she spoke. She gestured animatedly, smiling as if she were reliving fond memories. "Jack is such a great guy, Brian. You'd like him. He always has these deep, unique insights during our book discussions. And oh my God, his yoga poses. You wouldn't believe how flexible he is, he's a natural." That last part was my breaking point. I raised my hand abruptly, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Megan," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I don't care how flexible Jack is or how many insightful comments he makes about your books. What I want to know is why on earth would you say you want to come back here with him?" She looked at me as if I'd asked her to explain her favorite romantic movie. Her face lit up, and she responded without hesitation, as if her answer made all the sense in the world. "Well, because it's romantic, obviously," she said matter-of-factly. "I mean, this place is perfect for a getaway. And, you know, I've shared some personal moments with Jack. Being here would be such a special experience for both the body and the soul." I froze. My hand flew to my forehead, instinctively pressing against it like I could somehow keep my brain from unraveling entirely. My mouth hung open in disbelief. I felt like I was watching a surreal scene unfold in slow motion. Personal moments. Romantic getaway. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And for a moment, all I could do was stare at her, stunned and speechless. I genuinely began to question if I was losing my mind. Was this even real? Was I trapped in some bizarre dream, or could this be an elaborate, twisted prank? I stammered, struggling to find my voice. "Wait, hold on," I said, my words shaky. "Megan, are you telling me you're cheating on me? That Jack is your lover? And you're just casually bringing it up like we're talking about dessert options?" Megan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Cheating? Brian, don't be so dramatic. It's not cheating. It's perfectly normal. I mean, you never said you were against it." I nearly fell out of my chair. "Are you serious? This is the first time I'm hearing anything like this. I never agreed to anything like that. What are you even saying? Is this some kind of joke?" My voice was rising, and Megan's carefree demeanor cracked for the first time. She set her wine glass down with a sharp clink and leaned in, hissing, "Brian, keep your voice down. Stop making that face. You're scaring me, and you're going to ruin the mood." I laughed bitterly. "I'm ruining the mood?" I shot back. "Megan, you just admitted you're having an affair, and somehow, I'm the problem." "Brian, stop it," she snapped, her voice cold and firm. "You're embarrassing me. Can't we just have a calm, adult conversation about this?" I noticed eyes on us. A few nearby diners turned their heads, and a waiter hovered in the background, unsure whether he should intervene. My face burned, not from embarrassment, but from pure, seething rage. I shot up from my chair, the scrape of it against the floor echoing through the restaurant. "Fine," I growled through clenched teeth, barely able to contain my fury. "Let's go back to the room. If you want to talk, we'll do it there, away from everyone else." Megan glanced nervously around at the curious stares, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding around us. With a theatrical sigh, she grabbed her purse and stood up, muttering under her breath, "You're overreacting." My head was spinning as we walked out of the restaurant. This weekend was supposed to be a romantic escape, a chance to reconnect, and it had descended into a complete nightmare. There was no way I was going to let her twist my mind around like this. When the door to our hotel room slammed shut behind us, it was just the two of us now. The warm, celebratory vibe of our anniversary was gone, replaced by a suffocating tension that filled the air like a storm waiting to erupt. "All right, Megan," I said, turning to face her. "Talk. Start explaining." I turned to face her, anger and disbelief boiling inside me. "Start talking, Megan. Why are you doing this? Why would you cheat on me? Or is this some kind of sick joke? Just tell me it's a joke." Megan let out an exaggerated sigh, the kind that implied I was the one being unreasonable. "Brian, it's not cheating," she said, her tone condescending. "I've already told you, it's a partnership. Just a different kind of partnership." "Partnership?" I repeated, my voice rising with incredulity. "Megan, this isn't some business deal. This is our marriage. And what you're describing isn't a partnership, it's betrayal." She shook her head with a small laugh, as though my reaction was amusing. "Oh, Brian, stop being so old-fashioned. This is completely normal. And besides, you agreed to it." I stared at her in shock. "What? Megan, have you completely lost your mind? I would never agree to something like this. Even if I were out of my mind, I'd never give my wife permission to sleep with another man." She raised a hand, signaling me to calm down, her tone annoyingly playful. "Brian, you did agree." "Well, sort of," she said, almost teasing. "Do you remember that conversation we had about 4 months ago?" I frowned, straining to figure out what she was talking about. "What conversation?" "You know," she replied, her expression practically amused. "That time I was in the kitchen with Bethany, and you walked in. We were chatting, and I casually asked how you felt about an open marriage. You said, and I quote, 'Open marriage? Absolutely, I'm all for it. You know, trust, communication, spending time together, it's way better than a closed marriage where we avoid each other and live in separate rooms like roommates.' Then you laughed and walked out. Don't you remember?" It hit me like a ton of bricks. I did remember. I had been rushing out the door for a meeting that day. Megan and Bethany had mentioned open marriage, and I had tossed out a sarcastic comment, thinking nothing of it. It was just a joke, a throwaway remark I hadn't given a second thought. "Oh my God," I muttered, running a hand through my hair as the memory came flooding back. "I remember now." Megan smiled slightly, as if that explained everything. "See? You agreed." I stared at her in disbelief. "You thought I was serious?" "Megan, it was sarcasm. How could you possibly take that as permission for this?" "Megan, I was joking. I didn't even know what you were talking about back then. I wasn't being serious. Open marriage, closed marriage, you didn't explain anything." I exclaimed, my frustration boiling over. She shrugged, her tone disturbingly casual. "Well, maybe you should have asked." My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone and quickly searched open marriage meaning. Within seconds, definitions, articles, and examples filled the screen. My stomach twisted as I read through them. I could barely believe what I was seeing. This is insane," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You never talked to me about this. You didn't wait for a real answer. You just decided, on your own, that this was okay." Megan's face remained disturbingly calm. "Well, I noticed how you were acting around Rosie. You know, one of our clients. You were all flirty and overly friendly with her. Don't try to deny it, Brian. I figured you were already sleeping with her, so I made a logical conclusion. If it's okay for you, why can't it be okay for me? Besides, we're successful, Louise is almost grown up. Why not add something new to our marriage?" The floor felt like it was crumbling beneath me. I could barely comprehend what I was hearing. Rosie? I repeated, incredulous. Oh my God, Megan. I wasn't flirting with her. I was being polite. I helped her with a project because her dad, who happens to be my friend, asked me to. Rosie is married, has a kid, and she's 10 years younger than me. Are you even listening to yourself? And that's when it hit me like a slap across the face. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Megan had twisted reality, creating her own warped version of events to justify her actions. In her narrative, I was the villain, the one who had wronged her. All right, Megan said nonchalantly, leaning back on the bed as if this were some ordinary conversation. Let's pretend, for argument's sake, that you're not doing anything with Rosie, though honestly, Brian, she's a total hottie. But what about your basketball games with the guys? Isn't that just an excuse to sneak off somewhere? Like a strip club, maybe? Or something worse? I blinked, utterly stunned. What the hell are you even talking about, Megan? She didn't let me get another word in. Don't deny it, Brian, she said, her tone sharpening. I've read about this kind of thing, books, articles, stories from other women. I know how these things work. I couldn't believe it. She had completely lost touch with reality, spinning a narrative out of paranoia and unfounded accusations. Every word coming out of her mouth felt like another betrayal. I understand how it works, Megan said, her tone disturbingly calm, almost cheerful, like she was explaining some trendy new lifestyle she'd adopted. I'm not judging you, Brian. All I'm saying is that you need to accept that I have a partner on the side, just like I've accepted the possibility that you might too. My hands trembled, and my voice shook with barely controlled rage. Megan, this is insane. It's absolute nonsense. Don't you dare sit there and act like I'm the bad guy here. I'm not the one who betrayed us, and I won't let you twist it that way. I couldn't hold back anymore. My patience had completely snapped. I stormed over to the closet, yanked out my suitcase, and began throwing clothes into it without care. What are you doing? Megan asked, her voice carrying a hint of amusement, as if she were watching a child throw a tantrum. What does it look like? I shot back. The vacation's over. I'm done. I don't want to stay here, and I sure as hell don't want to look at you right now. She crossed her arms and leaned casually against the doorframe, completely unbothered. Well, that's fine, Brian, she said with a smug, indifferent tone. But I'm staying. I'm not going to let your little meltdown ruin my weekend. I plan to enjoy myself here, with or without you. I zipped my suitcase with a sharp tug and turned to face her. My hands were shaking with rage. Megan, let me make something perfectly clear, I growled. I will never accept this so-called partnership, with Jack or with anyone else. What you're doing isn't just some modern arrangement. It's cheating. Plain and simple. And if you think I'm going to sit back and let this happen, you're dead wrong. I'm ready to take action, starting with filing for divorce. She laughed. She actually laughed, as though I'd told her the most ridiculous joke she'd ever heard. Brian, she said, shaking her head dismissively, don't be so dramatic. You're not going to divorce me. Stop pretending like it's a real threat. Just calm down and think this through, okay? She smiled as if she had all the power, her words dripping with condescension. Besides, I love you, Brian, Megan said, her voice infuriatingly casual. Jack is just a light, romantic fling. If it really bothers you that much, I can stop seeing him, in a couple of months. Maybe take a little break so you won't feel so upset. That was it. That was the moment when the last shred of patience I had for this marriage disintegrated. Her smug smile, her ludicrous attempt to turn her betrayal into a negotiation, it was the final straw. Oh my God, I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. You don't get it, do you? You're standing here, tearing apart everything we built together, and you think I'm just going to roll with it? Well, guess what, Megan, I'm done. Without another word, I grabbed my suitcase, stormed out of the room, and left the resort. The drive home blurred past me, but my thoughts were painfully sharp. It was over. Our marriage was over. I had always been an idealist, clinging to values like freedom, responsibility, and loyalty. Megan had stomped all over those beliefs. I knew then I couldn't stay with someone who had no respect for me or the principles I held dear. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was eerily quiet, almost too still. As I stepped inside, before I could even put my suitcase down, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Louise appeared at the top, her face lighting up with surprise. "Dad? What are you doing home already?" she asked, her eyes scanning behind me. "Where's Mom?" I let out a long, weary sigh, running a hand through my hair. Louise had always been sharp, sometimes too sharp for her own good. I couldn't lie to her, but I also couldn't burden her with the full weight of the situation. "Well," I began carefully, "your mom and I had a disagreement. A big one. She decided to stay at the resort a little longer, and I came back to clear my head." Louise frowned as she descended the stairs, her concern evident. "What kind of disagreement? Is everything okay?" I hesitated, meeting her worried eyes. "Look," I said gently, "I won't sugarcoat it. Things between your mom and me, they're complicated right now. There's a chance we might not stay together." Her face fell, and she hugged herself tightly, as if bracing for the blow. "You mean, a divorce?" she whispered. I walked over to Louise and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know this is a lot to process, but I promise you, no matter what happens, everything will be okay. You are my priority, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Always." She nodded slowly, though the worry in her eyes didn't fade. "Okay, Dad. I trust you." Once she went back to her room, I sat down on the couch and pulled out my phone. It was time to take the next step. I scrolled through my contacts and dialed my attorney, Arthur, a no-nonsense guy who had handled business contracts for me in the past. "Brian?" Arthur answered, sounding surprised. "Didn't expect to hear from you during your big anniversary trip. What's going on?" I didn't hesitate. "Arthur, I need you to prepare divorce papers as soon as possible." There was a brief pause before he replied. "Divorce? That's sudden. Are you sure about this?" "As sure as I've ever been," I said, pacing the living room. "I need your help with everything, dividing assets, the business, finances, and most importantly, I need to make sure Louise is okay through all of this." Arthur let out a heavy sigh. "All right. The simplest route is a 50-50 split of everything. That's the standard unless you both agree to something different. We'll also need to address custody arrangements for Louise. She's old enough to have some input." "Got it," I replied, jotting down notes. "Let's move forward. I want a draft ready as soon as possible." "Understood," Arthur said firmly. The days that followed blurred together. I poured every ounce of my energy into work, using it as a distraction from the emotional storm I was facing. Louise kept her distance, probably sensing how overwhelmed I was. I didn't want her to see me unraveling. Finally, the draft of the divorce papers was ready. That evening, I called Megan and told her to come home. When she arrived, I was ready, done with the lies, the gaslighting, and the warped version of marriage she thought we had. I sat her down and placed the papers on the coffee table in front of us. "Megan," I said firmly, "this is it. I'm done. I've had enough of the lies and this fantasy you've built. I want out." Before she could respond, Louise appeared in the doorway, her face a mixture of confusion and fear. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small. Megan's expression softened immediately as she turned to her. "Sweetheart, don't worry," she said in a soothing tone. "It's just adult stuff. Your dad and I are working through some things. But Louise wasn't a little girl anymore. She crossed her arms and looked at us both, her eyes searching for the truth we were trying to protect her from. I stepped in before Megan could spin more lies, keeping my voice calm but resolute. No, Megan. No more of this. Louise deserves the truth, the real truth. Megan sighed dramatically and turned to Louise, her tone soft and syrupy. Sweetheart, she began, I think you deserve to know what's really going on. Your father. She paused, giving me a pointed look. Agreed to an open marriage. But now he's twisting everything to make me look like the bad guy so he can divorce me. Louise froze, her face a mixture of disbelief and confusion. What? Dad, is that true? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay grounded. No, Louise. It's not true, I said firmly. Months ago, your mom brought up the topic of an open marriage, once, and I made a sarcastic comment. I didn't know she was serious. Now she's using that moment to justify her choices. Louise hesitated, her gaze shifting between the two of us. She turned back to Megan. Mom. I don't think I'll ever understand this. Just talking about an open marriage feels like a betrayal. How could you possibly think this was okay? Megan's face hardened, but before she could retort, I stepped in again. Enough. This isn't a conversation Louise should be caught in the middle of. But Louise stood her ground, her voice steady and resolute. Dad, I want to stay with you. I'm not leaving you to deal with all of this alone. Megan's face paled as Louise's words sank in. In the days that followed, Louise became the glue that held everything together. At just 17, she showed a remarkable level of wisdom and composure far beyond her years. She stood by my side, offering quiet support and listening when I needed to vent. But she didn't completely cut her mother off. Instead, she found her own way to navigate the broken relationship. I don't condone what Mom did, she told me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. But she's still my mom. I'll always love her. I just need time to figure things out. Hearing that filled me with a bittersweet mix of pride and sadness. My daughter was far more mature than either of us had been during this ordeal. And in that moment, I knew that while the marriage was over, Louise and I would weather the storm together. I think Megan knew, deep down, that she'd messed up. The divorce was finalized not long after, and we went our separate ways. The business was gone, the house was no longer mine, and the life we had built together had unraveled completely. Yet, amidst all the heartbreak, I felt something unexpected, relief. Letting go of the past made room for a future I hadn't thought possible. Though I hated how everything had played out, I knew I was ready to move forward, for myself, for Louise, and for whatever came next. Life, as always, had its surprises. A year after the divorce, I had rebuilt a steady life. My days were full with work, hobbies, and making sure Louise was thriving. We had a rhythm now, a calm after the storm. One evening, while we were clearing up after dinner, Louise casually dropped some news. So, Dad. Mom started dating Jack, she said with a smirk. It's gotten pretty serious. Like, relationship serious. She even used some of the divorce money to open a yoga studio with him. I nodded, not surprised. That tracks, I said. So, what's the twist? Louise leaned in, clearly enjoying where this story was headed. Here's the funny part, she continued. A few weeks ago, I overheard Mom venting to Aunt Bethany. Venting about what? I asked, raising an eyebrow. About Jack, Louise said, her grin widening. Apparently, Mom thought they were exclusive, like a real couple. But Jack didn't see it that way. I couldn't help but chuckle softly, though a part of me felt a twinge of pity for Megan. Wow, I muttered. Well, I can't say I'm shocked. Louise grew more serious for a moment. That's not all, she added. Mom told Aunt Bethany that she regrets how she treated you. Apparently, she thinks about it a lot. Her words caught me off guard, and I fell silent, unsure how to respond. I rubbed the back of my neck, then asked quietly, "Do you think she's learned anything from all of this?" Louise shrugged. "I think so, or at least I hope so. She's not the same, Dad. I think she's starting to see things from your perspective now." I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "If that's true," I said thoughtfully, "then maybe some good came out of all this after all." We continued tidying up the kitchen in comfortable silence. The wounds weren't fully healed, but in that moment, I felt lighter. The scars of the past would always remain, but they didn't have to define the future. There was peace in knowing that both Megan and I were moving forward in our own ways, and that Louise, the glue that had held me together, would be stronger for it too. As Louise and I finished cleaning up, I stood by the window, watching the sky turn from deep orange to a quiet dusk. Life was beginning to feel stable again. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel consumed by anger or regret. The pain was still there, but it had dulled, just another part of my story now, not the whole of it. The days that followed felt lighter. Louise and I continued building our new life. We had movie nights, took weekend trips, and even tackled DIY projects around the house. I reconnected with friends, and surprisingly, I found myself open to the idea of dating again. I wasn't rushing into anything, but there was a sense of hope for the future that I hadn't felt in years. A few weeks later, I found a message from Megan in my inbox. It was short but sincere. "Brian, I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong, and I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I hope you're finding peace, and I truly wish you and Louise all the happiness in the world." I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a strange mix of emotions, closure, maybe. I didn't need an apology to move on, but hearing those words from her did help. I typed a brief response. "Thank you, Megan. I wish you the best too." And that was it. I closed the chapter, for real this time. Months passed, and I found myself more grounded than ever. One Saturday morning, Louise and I were sitting on the porch, sipping coffee. She was talking about her college plans and a new art project she was working on. I watched her, amazed by how strong and wise she'd become through everything. "You know," I said, smiling, "you're going to do amazing things, Lou. You've been my rock through all of this." She grinned and rolled her eyes. "Dad, you've told me that like 100 times." "Well, it's worth repeating," I said with a laugh. "I'm proud of you." We sat in peaceful silence, watching the world wake up around us. The storm that had once torn my life apart had passed. And now, all that remained was a deep, steady calm. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I was ready to embrace it, one moment at a time.